reading this morning and turn them to Exodus chapter 21. Exodus chapter 21. For this morning's reading, I'll be reading verses 33 through chapter 22, verse 17. Chapter 21, verse 33. It's found on page 62 if you're using one of the Pew Bibles. Please follow along with me as I read. When a man opens a pit, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restoration. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. When one man's ox butts another so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and share its price, and the dead beast also they shall share. Or if it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall repay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox, 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the beast in his own field and in his own vineyard. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. If a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God and show whether or not he has put his hand into his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, for any kind of lost thing of which one says, "This is it," the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep safe, and if it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them, both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor, and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word. This morning you may be seated. How many of you are familiar with Wordle? Raise your hand high and don't give away this morning's word. Really? Let's raise them higher. Who's familiar with Wordle? Okay. All right. Well, Wordle, I should have had a picture. Wordle is a word game that has 6 layers of fill in the blank for a 5-letter word. So it's got just like 5 blank, 5 blank, 5 blank, 5 blank, 6 times. And you have 6 tries to guess the word. Now, when you enter a word into the first layer, as soon as you enter it and then you press enter, it tells you which letters are not in the word at all by turning the color gray. The letters that are in the word but are in the wrong place, they turn yellow. The letters that are in the right place and the right letter, they turn green. So you get feedback from your word. Now you have to enter the word again. And you think of a new word that has the right letters in the right place, and it has the letters that you put in the wrong place but are in the word. You move them somewhere else, and you think of a word. And you have 6 tries to come up with this word. And it's like a sensation. It's very fun. It's really nice because you only get one a day, so you can only do it once. You know, it takes me on average like 10 minutes or so. And then it gives you your stats and your report. It's really fun. If you haven't tried it, try it. But here's what's fascinating. It's a word that somebody chose. It's a common word. You know it, probably. But yet we're excited to try to figure out this word. Think about a puzzle. Why don't you just, for those of you who like to do puzzles, why don't you just look at the picture of the puzzle? It's on the box. You already know what it looks like. Why do we pour out all of these multiple pieces, 300, 500,000, and spend hours on end putting together a picture that we could already see? What is it about humanity that loves solving puzzles? I think it goes back, it's not on the screen, just listen as I quote it. It comes from Proverbs 25:2. And it says this: "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of kings to find it out." Just think about that for a moment. That there is something about God that loves to make something concealed. Concealed in such a way that our faces get glorified when we find it out. Do you see that? That's where I think puzzles come from. That it's in our image to do something in a conciliatory manner that is done not to stay concealed, but it's done in such a way to invite other people in to say, what is he getting at here? What's he talking about? I see that this piece has the same color as this piece. They must go together. That is interesting, isn't it? And this is what actually brings glory to us as human beings. This is why the Psalms say, "Blessed is the man who makes the law," that's what we're studying here, "his meditation day and night." And he's not talking about the Bible as a whole. He's talking about the law. He's talking about this passage that I just read to you and that you're scratching your heads saying, "Sheesh, I wonder how many churches in America are cheating on this right now." And yet, the psalmist says, "Blessed is the man who makes the law his meditation day and night." That this portion of Scripture is such that it is like a puzzle that you are meant to put together and figure out, and what is this getting at, and what's the underlying point, and what's this headed to? How is this fulfilled in Christ? Where do we see this come to its full culmination in the New Testament? This is like a seed that grows, and what's the point of all of these passages? What does an ox goring another ox have to do with a virgin that sleeps with her boyfriend before she's married? What do those two things have to do with each other? Why are they put next to each other? What is the point? And it's the glory of God that you ask that question. He did it that way. He didn't have to do it this way. It could have all been New Testament. It could have. But it wouldn't have been to his glory. This is the way God arranged it. And so it's our job to get involved with it. And my point in bringing up Wordle and puzzles is the fact that you like to do it in everything else. Do we like to do it with God's word? Because it's way better. In fact, the psalmist will say, you meditate on God's law day and night, I'm going to tell you what you're like. You are going to be like a tree that's planted in the best possible spot by streams of water. And as that tree's roots go into that water, it yields its fruit in season. Its leaves don't wither. When bad things happen, it doesn't get shredded. And it's a blessing to other people. People can come up next to it and take that fruit and eat it. You will be like a tree of life in the Garden of Eden that is a blessing to everyone who comes near you. When you make the law your meditation day and night. But if you choose to hang out with the scoffers and you choose to hang out with the people that don't like God's word, I'll tell you what you're like. You're like the chaff, the stuff that doesn't matter, that the wind blows away. And the Lord watches over the path of the righteous, but he doesn't pay attention to the path of the wicked. You're here today, gone tomorrow, with no lasting influence. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm just trying to say what God's word says. That it is to our glory. It is to the world's benefit that we tackle hard passages that seem incongruent with our culture today. And say, where is the glory of God in this passage? I'm going to find it out. And as I find it out, my face will be radiant. Somehow, some way. So let's dig in. Let's start by looking at the outline for the sermon. What we want to ask with this morning's text is there something that came before this text that helps us understand this text? God doesn't just drop us into these texts like in a parachute and not have any idea what's going on. This text follows a whole portion of text that help inform this text. So, just like you're doing a puzzle on a table and you're looking for alignment and colors that match, so this text has to do with what came before it. What was that came before this text that helps us understand this actual text? Second, let's look at the text itself and say, what is this all about? How does it make sense with itself? And then third, what comes after this text that this text was just a seed for and it's growing into a tree? What's the tree look like? What's this seed form germinated? What does it look like when it grows up? We'll talk about that with the New Testament. And then finally, what does that have to do with my life right now? And these are good questions to ask any text that you're studying. Is there something that came before that helps me understand this text right here? As I meditate on this text, what does it have to do with itself? And then God doesn't just give us this text to not pick it up again. Where does it go in the New Testament? And then the final question, which we frequently jump to too quickly, is what does this text have to do with me right now? If you don't ask the first three questions, you're not going to have a good answer for the fourth one. So let's start with the first question. What has come before this text that helps us understand this text? And I would say what's come before this text, there are three ideas that have come before this text that help us understand this text. The first is this concept of dominion. Dominion. That you are kings and queens. You're either bad kings and queens, which we're getting to see right now, aren't we? It's all over the news. You're getting to see what good dominion looks like and bad dominion. Good leadership and poor leadership. We're all seeing it. It's in our faces every day. But it's not just on the news. It's also in the mirror. It's also in the noises of our homes. It's also in our relationships. We are either having dominion in a good way or a bad way. Dominion was given to us by God. This is the idea. You remember, again, reading the Bible like a puzzle, when you read the Genesis narrative, what you find, interestingly, is that God names things in the first 3 days. He doesn't stop creating in the next 3 days. He's still creating in the next 3 days. But he doesn't name anything in days 4, 5, and 6. Did you notice that ever? Well, here's what's interesting. God names things in days 1 through 3. Then in Genesis 2, what does God have man do? Start naming things, right? So here's the idea. God created the world, and he forms it in days 1 through 3, and he names it. And he doesn't name anything in 4, 5, and 6, presumably because that's what Adam will do, just like he named the animals. Do you see that God's dominion in days 1 through 3 is now put on Adam when he starts naming the animals? He names Eve. This is the idea. To name something is to have dominion. This is why when Jacob is wrestling the angel, what does Jacob want to know? He's got him in a headlock, angel of the Lord. What's he want to know? Tell me your name. Why? Because to know someone's name is to have in some way, shape, or form authority over them. It might just be very small. But naming something or having someone's name is some sense of authority. That's what Jacob wanted over the angel of the Lord. Does the angel of the Lord cooperate? Absolutely not. Why? Because he is, I am who I am. What's your name, God? My name is I am who I am. That's no name. That's back off. In other words, you will not get me in a headlock. I am who I am. So naming has to do with authority. It has to do with dominion. We see God do it in creation, and then he hands it off to Adam. But what's happening here? Adam, and this leads to our second concept that's at play in this passage, is this concept of image. Because how you carry out your dominion reflects something. It's meant to reflect God. This is the concept. Another thing you can notice in the creation narrative that gets to this idea of image is in the creation narrative, what you sense is that there is a top-down creation. Think about that for a moment. Top-down creation. The earth starts with light and dark, then it gets to the atmosphere, and then it gets to the land. And then days 4 through 6 replicate that process, and they match each other with day 5 with day 1, or excuse me, day 4 with day 1, day 5 with day 2, day 6 with day 3. They correspond. In days 4, as they work their way down, you've got the luminaries, then the birds, and the fish, and then the land animals. So what you sense in the process is that in creation, heaven is working its way to earth. That's the way it's meant to go, from top down. Father, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You ever look at some still water and you can see the sky on the still water? You see that? The color blue of the sky. It's a really awesome sight. That's just a mental image of how creation was supposed to work. Heaven is meant to make an imprint on earth. That's the idea. So, dominion is meant to be that your rule, even if you're 6 years old in the service this morning, your dominion, you have dominion. It may just be this big, but you have a sense of dominion. If you're 86, you have dominion. However big or however small, we all have dominion. What's supposed to happen is our dominion is meant to reflect God's. Again, we're seeing this play out in the news. One calls the shots from the outside in, one is in the inside, on the threshing floor, as it were, with his troops. You see the difference in leadership. You see a dominion that you say, I like that. I don't like that. That's the image of God, grabbing a hold of a similar image, whether the person knows Christ or not. We have dominion that can either reflect God or not. This is the idea. Heaven is meant to be imprinted on earth. That's the way it works. Now, what this brings us to in the third concept that should be at play here in Exodus 21 and 22 is this idea of maturation. That's a big fancy word for mature. We need to mature. Heaven is mature. It's where God dwells. It's perfect. It needs to be translated to earth, which is yet still being formed and filled in all these sorts of things. The earth still needs cultivation. That's what Adam and Eve were going to do. It needs to mature. But not just earth. We, as his images, need to mature. That's the idea. There may even be a play at Adam and Eve being naked and unashamed. Who does that remind you of in our world? I'm not talking about streakers. Who does that remind us of? Babies, children, right? Naked, unashamed. They don't care. They don't mind. Some till they're too old. this is the idea that Adam and Eve are like children. You got to be a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. This is the idea that we need matured into the image of God. That's why God will do what he does to Adam, where he has him name the animals. He wants him to see that all of these animals have a corresponding partner, but he doesn't. So he looks to God and says, what do I do? God puts him to sleep. He brings Eve. Adam just had a growing experience, did he not? Right? He saw that he had a need. God supplied the need, and Adam says, okay, I learned something. Every time I have a need, perfect creation doesn't mean you don't have needs. But God created those needs to show that what? He meets those needs. That's why he'll put Israel in the wilderness and not give them food or water or security. To teach them that man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of the Lord. That's a maturing process. And what we find in Exodus is that just like Adam and Eve were naked, like babies, so we find babies in Exodus. It's a huge theme. Babies in Exodus. You're like, what? Where do we find this concept of babies in Exodus? Well, as Exodus just begins, what starts happening in Israel? They are multiplying like crazy. What brings multiplication? Babies, right? Okay. They get so big that these babies take center focus. They're on the stage, the spotlight's shining on. Because what does Pharaoh want to do to these babies? He wants the midwives to murder them, right? Upon child labor. So you got child labor all over the place. They don't do it, so then he tells his troops and the whole people of Egypt, take these baby boys and throw them in the Nile, right? So babies. Then you have Moses. What's Moses? He's a beautiful baby. They put him in an ark, and they cover it in pitch, and they put it in there, and then he's raised by Pharaoh's daughter, and his mom nurses him. But it's babies. Babies are all over the place. Then Moses gets sent to Pharaoh, and God gives Moses the message. He says, what you need to say to Pharaoh is that Israel is my, what does he call him? Firstborn son. What's that make you think of? A baby, right? Guys, listen. Here's what you have to get. The Bible is written in a way that we don't understand. It's written with symbols and images that you're meant to think about and say, there's so much about babies in the beginning of Exodus. What does all this mean? Well, then you get to the prophets in the Old Testament, and the prophets tell you what it means. You don't even have to wait for the prophets. Deuteronomy tells you. Because Moses says, when I brought you out of Egypt, you were like baby eagles. You were like eaglets that the mother eagle carried on her wings or on her pinions and carried out. So what does he compare Israel to? Something young, a young animal, right? Then you get to the prophets. Ezekiel looks back and he says, you know what? When God found you, Israel, you were like a baby with its cord uncut, wallowing in its own blood. You weren't rubbed with salt. You didn't have any clothes. That's how God found you. What's he referring to? This moment. Israel is meant to be seen in this passage that they are like little babies. They're like young children. Hosea says, Ephraim, he taught you how to walk with his arms on your arms. You're meant to read Exodus and say, you know what? I think God is telling me through all these things that Israel is like a young child. Just like Adam, in those images, being naked and unashamed, is like a young child. And just like the earth started formless and void, Adam started naked like a little baby, and he needed to be discipled and matured by God, and he did. He was sinless, but he wasn't fully mature. We even see Jesus have to go through a maturing state and growing in wisdom and knowledge and stature. This is the way God does things. It's kind of beautiful, actually, because you might sit here and think, oh, to be in church, I got to be perfect. No, to be in church, you have to be maturing. That's the idea. That's what God's house does. It matures. Wherever we're at, it matures us. He wouldn't be loving if he didn't mature us, right? That would not be a good dad. So, these are the concepts at play in this passage. God has created his images. His images are to reflect him through having dominion. Dominion gets taught. It doesn't just get downloaded. It gets taught. Okay? So, Israel is a baby. And what do we find? This is a final point here for maturation. You get to the New Testament. How does the New Testament talk about the law, which is the first 5 books of the Bible? How does it talk about it? Paul calls it, and the author of Hebrews calls it, the elementary things. Who goes to elementary school? Young kids, right? That's what the law was. The law was the ABCs of God's reflection, of his dominion. To look at the law was first kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. That's what it was. It was educating children on how to be like him. But then when you get to the New Testament with Christ, Paul says the mission of the church is to present every man and woman as attaining to full, what? Maturity, to full manhood. So this book is a picture of educating children and bringing them to full stature in Christ, full maturity, so that the church fills all in all with the knowledge and glory of God. That's what this book is about. That's where we're at. God is taking these children. They've just come out of Egypt. They're just like all of this baby stuff in the beginning. They are infants. They're babies. And God is now educating them. He started talking to them about not stealing other people. That sounds like an elementary thing, right? Don't steal other people the way Egypt stole you, right? You have servants in a way that actually benefits them, not only benefits the holder. Then he talked to them about not murdering people. That sounds very elementary too, doesn't it? Hey, that knife, you walk with it this way. Knives aren't a game. They're not they're used for certain things. You could hurt your brother or sister. This is elementary things. Don't murder. Careful. Now he's talking about possessions. These very same talks are going on in the nursery right now. You hearing that? This is what he's talking about, possessions. What we have, now this brings us to our next point. That's before the text. So all of these things should be in. God is educating his child, is a quick summary of the first point. He's educating his child so that their dominion looks like his dominion. That's what he's doing. So now let's look at the text where he talks about, how to be his reflection. What do all of these things have to do to each other? Well, I'm going to tell you how to read your Bible. You read your Bible by reading it over and over and over and then stepping back and saying, okay, and preferably out loud. I know that might sound weird, but that's how the Bible was meant to be read. In fact, most people, until nearly the last 100, 200 years, people didn't read. They didn't have a need to. So the Bible was heard more than it was read. So if you want to receive the Bible like the majority of history has received the Bible, you'll listen to it. That's the way it was meant to be heard or read, received. Okay, so you read it, you hear it, you listen to it, and then you back up. And you say, what does this have to do with this? What does a guy sleeping with his girlfriend before they're married and him paying her father a certain amount of money, what does that have to do with an ox goring another man's ox and him having to pay for that? So you step back and you let it marinate and you say, what is going on there? What is it? And what you end up with, you find something as general as you can to fit everything in the passage, okay? And when you do that, you start to understand the wisdom of it, and you're unpacking the puzzle. It's fun. It will keep you busy while you work. Your brain will be ruminating on this. You think I'm crazy. It's happening to me. You might think I'm still crazy, but it's happening to me. I can't stop thinking about it, and it's fun. So what you have in every one of these passages, every one of these verses is this. Somebody has lost something that was rightfully theirs that needs to be paid back. That's the commonality. A father lost his daughter to her boyfriend. Now, it doesn't mean he raped her. That's not what's at play here. He seduced her, which means they're together. They're boyfriend, girlfriend. But he's the leader, so he's the one that pays. He's the one that pushed the envelope, and he slept with his girlfriend before he should have in an irresponsible way. Now, he owes that father the full bride price. What does that have to do with? Well, the bride price, number one, paid the family because they just lost a valuable worker in their home. So it helped them out. Number two, if that girl's father ever died and her husband died, she might be in a really bad spot. So responsible fathers wouldn't just say, oh, now I have the money in place of my daughter. A responsible dad would say, this money is going over here, and it's going to be kept safe for her in case anything happens to me and her husband. That's what a responsible dad would do. So the bride price actually took care of the girl, which her boyfriend just didn't. Do you see that? So this is what's at play here. The father lost something. Even the girl lost something, even though she was complicit in it. Now, these other two guys, they have two oxen. One guy has an ox, the other guy has an ox. This ox scores the other guy's ox. What does that have to do with? Well, you got to understand that was his John Deere tractor. He used it every single day. It would be akin to a plumber or an electrician or a general contractor with his truck, with all the tools that he had. It took him years to acquire, and somebody stole that truck. And there was no insurance then. What does the guy do? That's his livelihood. That's why this text follows capital punishment for murdering somebody. Because if you steal a general contractor's truck that he's got all his tools in, and he doesn't have a way to recoup that, you may as well have murdered him. You stole his livelihood. That's why kidnapping was a capital offense. You basically stole a person's life, right? And this is close to that. It doesn't receive capital punishment, but you need to repay this guy. It's his livelihood. So all of these texts, and we'll go very quickly through them in this point, but they have to deal with dealing equitably with that which is lost, and above all, seeking to prevent anything from being lost at all. Now, the next slide I want to show you as we go quickly through the text is I want you to see the attributes that if you ruminate and meditate and chew on and digest this text, you got to ask yourself, what are the attributes that God is hinting at here for society? He's teaching Israel how to live as a mature human being. What attributes do mature people have? Okay? What does that look like? Well, the attributes, let's go to that next slide. What God is seeking to create, and I'm going to just leave this on the screen as we go through the text. So as I comment on each thing, you can say, oh, I can see how that attribute's at play here. I can see how that one's at play here. God is creating, through this passage, a thoughtful, respectful, responsible, equitable, peace-pursuing, reconciliatory, forgiving, restorative, trusting God and man, confessing, discipling, social, loving people. Doesn't that seem like a nice society to live in? Wouldn't that be great? Maybe you have that in your neighborhood. Maybe your neighbors are all like this. Maybe you've worked actively to create this environment in your neighborhood. This is a wonderful thing. And that's what this law is meant to create. It's meant to say to Ben Lovelady and Becky Lovelady, when you get a letter from your post person that says, your dog's bit me twice, and if it happens again, I'm not delivering your mail. That's a true story. So Ben is going to, as soon as the ground softens, move the marker for Oreo, right? This is it. And it's like it's in every way. What happens when you borrow your neighbor's tool and it breaks? All these sorts of things. They're all at play. Let's work quickly through the text. You look at your text. It won't be on the screen. Verses 33 and 34 of chapter 21. A man loses his animal because it falls in another's pit. These pits had very narrow openings, and then they held water is what they did. Narrow openings, and then they opened up into a really wide chasm. So if something fell in there, human or beast, it couldn't get out easily. It would likely die. And so this happens. Now, Israel's going to inherit land that already has these. And what God's saying is that when you get the land in Canaan and it has these holes in it, you need to cover that up to prevent your neighbor's beast from falling into it. This is the idea. It's being thoughtful, you know. You're working on an electric outlet, you know, cover it up in a safe way if you're having guests over, you know, that type of thing. This is what's going on. But if the animal falls in, and by the way, when you read this text, do you remember when the two women with a child, one with a dead child, dead baby, and one with an alive one, came to Solomon and they said, what do we do? And we read that passage and Solomon says, we'll divide the baby in two and give a half to each. And the one that's truly her baby says, no, just give it to her. What do we do at Solomon? What did the whole nation do in that moment? The text tells you, they what? They marveled at Solomon's wisdom. That is what you're meant to do with God's decisions here. You're meant to read these in such a way that say, oh, that's brilliant. That's really good. That's smart. One of the interesting things in this text is that if that happens to you, if it's your land and you were a little bit lazy and didn't cover up the hole and your neighbor's ox fell into it, you had to repay him the ox, but then God puts in this law, but you get to keep the dead one. And it's kind of interesting. I was talking to Becky about that. I'm like, it's interesting that God did that. How would you feel if you were the lazy one? I know you can't relate, but I can. If I'm the lazy one and my neighbor's animal falls and it's on me and I pay him back for the loss, and then he says to me, oh, and by the way, when you pull that thing out of there, I'd like that too. Would that bother you a little bit, even as a lazy person? It might bother you. It's just interesting. God says, but he gets to keep the beast. And that wasn't a burden on him because he could keep the skin. It was very valuable. So check. You should say, why does God do what he does? Verse 35, two men are working near each other. An oxen gores the other one, kills it. Here's the thing. If that's happened before and he didn't stop it and didn't put it out of its misery because it's hurting other ox, he needs to pay a higher price. But if it was an accident, it's just an accident. Animals do unpredictable things. You sell that one, you split the money, and you both divide the beast. It's very reasonable. Verse 1, in God's wisdom, someone who steals to get ahead will actually end up 5 or 4 times worse off. Do you see that? Someone steals, they have to pay 5 times for an ox, probably because it took a lifetime to train an ox in the way just that you liked it. So it's 5 times. A sheep doesn't have as much training, 4 times. So you steal to get ahead, you end up way behind. Do you see that? Now, something also interesting is later in the book of Leviticus, if someone steals something and they feel bad about it and they confess, they only had to pay an extra 5th. That's it. Think about it. 5 times, 4 times, or if you feel guilty and you say, hey, I stole this. Here it is. You add a 5th to it. That's it. What is that promoting? Confession. Do you see that? It's promoting. It's saying, hey, Israel, you're feeling bad about something you stole? That's good. Go bring it back and you'll just have a minimal punishment. Now, this also explains some things about corporal punishment, which is being caned, likely. I just looked up this morning on Wikipedia. Do you remember all the buzz in 1994 when a young man was in Singapore and he got caned? Do you remember that, for those of you older folks? Okay. America was going nuts. Absolutely nuts. Okay. This passage helps us understand the corporal punishment that we looked at, because you could physically discipline your slave. Now, if you knocked as much as a tooth out, he or she was set free. But this passage helps us understand it a little bit better, because if somebody stole something and they couldn't repay it, they became a servant to pay off the debt. Now, just think about this. If you were poor in Israel, every 3rd year, every wealthy person, every medium to wealthy or to even poor, they gave a tithe to the sanctuary. That tithe, just like our benevolent fund, was given out to the poor people in Israel. So you had an income through people's generosity that God commanded, actually. You remember, you weren't supposed to glean all your fields. You're supposed to leave the edges and leave what dropped, right? The poor people could eat that. Every 7th year, you got a forgiveness of debt, right? Okay? If you were to get a loan as a poor person, the person giving you the loan couldn't charge interest. Okay? So what you have is you have grace factored in. So someone who stole as a poor person, they were what to God's grace? They were saying, no, God's welfare system is not good enough for me. I want more. Do you see that? Now, this type of person that would steal now became a servant. Do you think this person would be a difficult person to work with? Guys, I'm not trying to be more holy than God. The answer is absolutely. God put in a system for those who made terrible decisions to make it to the 7th year. But those people would sometimes say, no, that's not enough for me. I want more, so I'm going to steal your stuff. Then they became a servant to pay it off. Now you say, I like our system so much better. Well, listen to how our system works. You have incarceration, which guess what? Who's paying for that? We are. You don't have the prisoner, we don't have the prisoner face us face to face. Or as a prisoner, you don't face the person you wrong face to face. You get shipped off somewhere. Are you restored to that person? No. You get out of prison, do you even want to see that person? No. You want as much distance as you can, generally speaking. So, does that person ever get paid back? No. See, our system is set up that it's just very ship them off, I don't want to deal with it. That person doesn't get bettered. You don't get restored. There's no integrity in that system. So we may look at this, the secularists may look at this and say, what an archaic system. That's what everybody said when this guy got caned. Which, by the way, did you know what Michael Fay did in 1994? What he was convicted for was him and some others damaging neighbors' cars, spreading hot tar over them, paint remover, red spray paint, hatchets, and eggs. Taxi cab drivers had their tires slashed. One man had to restore his vehicle 6 times in 6 months. So this was a bad deal, right? Now, he didn't admit to all those things, and only God knows. But this is what they were disciplined for. Where did he get caned? On his tush. It was 6 times. They reduced it to 4. He said, I was really sore for 5 days. This is exactly what you have in the Old Testament. So, listen, I'm not running for president. I'm just saying, consider God's ways and say, what is better for the offender? What is better for the offendee? You consider it. This is the idea. And just wait till we get to the New Testament, because Jesus has a little bit to say about it too. Okay? All right. So, I'm just going to move very quickly here. A thief's caught in the night. Listen, you can't see. It's not like they had street lights. There's grace. If you're going to steal in the night, if you're going to be on somebody's property, you better be prepared to die. That's what the law is saying. Because they're not in trouble if they kill you. They don't know why you're there, right? But if in the daytime you can scream out, you can get other people to help, and a life is valuable enough that it's not worth something over possessions, so you don't do it. This is how the law works. Grazing animals. Grazing animals. You would have brought out your animals to eat what was left after the harvest, to finish a field. But you would never, ever let an animal near your crops before they were harvested. Goats damaged trees. They damaged vineyards. They would ruin a crop for quite some time. So this is the idea. Farmers had thorns around the field, so they didn't let these animals out. I have a picture actually on the screen. This is where wood was too valuable to build fences like we have, so they did it with stone. They would only let their animals out in a controlled way. They'd have them strapped or whatever, but they'd never let them near the field. By the way, quick insertion. You remember what Jacob said to Judah about his inheritance? Remember? He says, Judah, upon your line, there will come a day when people will tether their donkey next to choice vines, and they won't care. In other words, the day that Jesus is bringing, it's basically the equivalent of when Jesus comes back, people will start fires with $1,000 bills. I'm not trying to be more holy than God. That's what he says. So build your treasures in heaven, not on earth. That's what he says. But back here, this is a bad deal. They used them for cleanup. They would never do it. So who would allow this to happen? A lazy person would allow this to happen. They'd let their animals go, and then you were to pay them back out of the best of your produce. Another example is fire. You would burn your fields at the end of harvest. We were in Idaho on our wilderness trip, and they had forest fires. But we'd be kayaking down the river, and you'd see super clean lines where the fire came and just stopped. Completely clean. Well, how did it stop? Well, that guy knew the fire was coming, and so he cut down everything in front of his house so that the fire would burn and then just stop because it couldn't burn anything else, right? So the idea here is that when you have a fire, don't have a fire on a windy day, right? That could get out of hand. Or cut the edges of your field to the point where the fire can't keep going in your neighbor's field. This is just all common responsibility and that sort of thing. That's what's going on here. And then, you entrust something to someone, it's stolen. Best case scenario, you don't say, hey, I think you stole it. But maybe you did. Maybe you think, hey, Chuck, I let you borrow this. I'm kind of judging you right now. I think you might have stolen it instead of had it stolen. You were to go before God, and God would make that clear if it was stolen. We'll talk about how that happened in the weeks to come. But this is the type thing. And I'm going to move forward for sake of time. But you're supposed to look at this. We are supposed to look at this and say, am I handling everything according to, let's go to the next slide there, these descriptions? Is this me? Is this me? So, let's fast forward now and say, how does this text grow? This is a seed. This is a seed. It grows up. And what does it look like in the New Testament? Well, there are two passages that deal specifically with things, items in this text. These are the elementary things, right? What do the mature things look like? That's what the New Testament's about. This is all kindergarten, first grade, second grade. What does full maturation look like? So we come to the New Testament, and we meet a thief. His name is Zacchaeus. He's a tax collector. In that day, if you were walking on a street and a tax collector were walking near you, you'd move to the other side of the street. People hated tax collectors. Everybody knew they were thieves. And Zacchaeus was a high ranking. So Zacchaeus is a thief. Everybody knows it. But Jesus is coming to town. And so Zacchaeus, he's a short guy. He climbs a tree so he can see Jesus. And as Jesus is coming down, he walks to the tree. He tells him to come down. And this is how the text reads. So he hurried and came down and received Christ joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. Now, Zacchaeus is confessing, is he not? According to the law, Leviticus, he just needs to add a fifth. He's going to restore it 4 times. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. Now, Zacchaeus went way beyond the law. Do you see that? He took the elementary training he received as a boy, and he went far beyond. Why? Because the law was the bare necessity. Do you see that? It's just the base. It's just kindergarten. Where's it supposed to go? It's supposed to go to Zacchaeus, is where it's supposed to go. Jesus looks at him and he says, this is God's law grown up. This is full maturation. This is where it's at. Now, where did Jesus come by that, right? Well, this brings us to the second passage. And this is found in Matthew 18, where Peter says to Jesus, listen, my brother, he buys the oxen. Now I'm making this up, okay? I'm imagining why Peter was mad at his brother for sinning against him 7 times, okay? Let's just imagine for a second. My neighbor is a cheapskate. So you know when that goring ox comes up for sale, he always buys them because they're cheap. This is the 7th time that my ox has been killed by his stupid ox. Do something about it. Oh, how many times? What's supposed to happen? I mean, this guy. And Jesus tells this story. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Modern day equivalent, the best estimates by the commentators, that would range from several million to $1 trillion. That's the number Jesus chooses. This number that he chooses is barely imaginable in this world. It's what $1 trillion is to us. Who can even think about it? I've heard $1 billion is if you got $1 a second from the day you were born, you wouldn't get $1 billion until you were 35. So that's $1 billion. I'm remembering that, so don't quote me on that. Look it up. But $1 trillion. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that they had, and payment to be made. Where does that come from? It comes from Exodus 21 and 22. He couldn't pay the debt, therefore he had to enter servanthood to pay off the debt. But it's laughable, right? Because he could do this 10 lifetimes. He could do it 1,000 lifetimes, and he'd never pay the debt. So it's a joke. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, "Have patience with me, and I'll pay you everything." And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when the same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, estimated at 100 days' wages, a few months' pay. Seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, "Pay what you owe." So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I'll pay you." He refused and put him in prison until he should pay off the debt, which is this servanthood idea. He's paying off the debt as he works. He's bound. When the 7th year comes, this guy doesn't get released, right? He's a slave till he pays it off. It's different. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. This master summoned him and said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you?" And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. So, this brings us to right now, our final point. You see, friends, here's the idea. Israel was essentially saved out of debt, right? They were enslaved, right? Now, it wasn't their fault. Egypt did it to them wrongly, but they're essentially slaves forever as far as they know. And God redeems them. And the idea then becomes, you are to be a person that not just deals equitably with people around you, but even more like I was with you back then. That's the idea. So when Zacchaeus is exceptionally benevolent, God says, you're getting my heart. See, because my heart is such a heart that if I've been this huge debt and this guy rightfully owes me, I say, hey man, listen. The text says he had compassion. He had pity. And he forgave him. And what that's supposed to create is a heart just like the master's heart, right? So it's like, hey, it's okay. It's okay. I forgive you. I'm going to eat that debt. It doesn't just disappear. I take it. But I'm happy to. Because I've been saved out of a much greater debt. Our offense of God is like this. That's why hell is forever, right? If you sin against an infinite being, your punishment becomes infinite. If it's going to be equitable, you've sinned against an infinite being. Therefore, your punishment is infinite. It's forever. That's why hell is hell. Hell is so low because heaven is so high. That's the thing. And so, this is what it is. But God forgave us. He took it out on Christ. Therefore, Christ is the maturity of the elementary truths. He lays down his life. That's the concept. And so, what does this look like in real time? The idea is that we in Christ ought to be the most thoughtful, respectful, responsible, equitable, peace-pursuing, reconciliatory, forgiving, restorative, trusting God and man, confessing, discipling, social, loving people that exist. Because while these laws train us in all these things, being forgiven, the debt we owed, makes us want to be everything Egypt was not. And put succinctly in the next slide, forgiveness cultivates love. And I want to close by reading something I just read this week. Brian Bill, pastor at Edgewood, sent me this article on Brian Smith from Wildwood, and just very awesome, from the Gospel Coalition. It's written by a Ukrainian pastor, Vasyl Ostry. Listen to what the church in Ukraine is doing. In recent days, Vasyl writes, the events from the book of Esther have become real to us in Ukraine. It's as if the decree is signed and Haman has the license to destroy an entire nation. The gallows are ready. Ukraine is simply waiting. Can you imagine the mood in a society when gradually, day after day for months, the world's media has been saying that war is inevitable, that much blood will be shed? In recent weeks, nearly all the missionaries have been told to leave Ukraine. Western nations evacuated their embassies and citizens. Traffic in the capital of Kiev is disappearing. Where did the people go? Oligarchs, businessmen, and those who can afford it are leaving, saving their families from potential war. Should we, the church, do the same? My wife and I have decided to remain in our city near Kiev. We want to serve the people here, along with Irpin Bible Church, where I joined the pastoral team in 2016. In anticipation of the coming disaster, we've bought a supply of food, medicine, and fuel so that, if necessary, we'll be able to help those in need rather than burden them. Ours is a family of 6. We're raising 4 daughters. What I worry about most is my 16-year-old who travels to college every day for an hour and a half, one way by public transportation. The media warns that if Russia invades, mobile communications will be lost and public transit will likely collapse. Thankfully, her classes have now gone online. Since the border with Belarus is only 150 kilometers, 92 miles from Kiev, one of the possible options for an enemy attack is through Belarus. The local media is recommending that we pack an emergency suitcase. I told my children, pack your backpacks. Pack enough things for 3 days. In the past, such packing meant we were going on vacation or a fun trip. So our younger children, 6 and 8 years old, have been asking, Dad, where are we going? At first, I didn't know what to answer. I told them we weren't going anywhere. How should the church respond when there is a growling threat of war? When there is a constant fear in society? I'm convinced that if the church is not relevant in a time of crisis, then it's not relevant in a time of peace. We believe the church is a place of spiritual struggle. As tensions have risen, our church announced a week of fasting and prayer, gathering every night to bring our requests to God. For 3 days in a row, the lights were turned off in the city. We were forced to meet in the dark, adding a solemn atmosphere to our prayers for peace. At the end of the week, those moments produced in us an inner strength to persevere. Through communal prayers, we've gained confidence and peace. We believe God is with us, and that is the most important thing. During this critical moment, our church, which has about 1,000 people attending on a normal Sunday, is a place of service. We've recently conducted several trainings on performing first aid. People are learning how to apply a tourniquet, stop bleeding, apply bandages, and manage airways. These lay people aren't going to become doctors, but this has given them confidence to care for their neighbors if necessary. In fact, when I first announced the first aid training, one brother told me, "Now I know why we need to stay in Ukraine." We had planned to leave. He had planned to leave. He knew he was not a soldier. He wasn't able to take up arms and fight, but he now wants to stay to help the wounded and to save lives. We have decided to stay both as a family and as a church. When this is over, the citizens in Kiev will remember how Christians have responded in their time of need. If necessary, the church premises can be turned into a shelter. We have a good basement. We're ready to deploy a heating station, as well as provide a place for a military hospital. To make this a reality, we're creating response teams. If martial law is declared, they're ready with a strategic supply of fuel, food, and material for dressing wounds. We've even gathered information on who in the church are doctors, mechanics, plumbers, even who has wells in case of a water shortage. We have decided to stay both as a family and as a church. Us, that's a repeat. And while the church may not fight like a nation, we still believe we have a role to play in this struggle. We will shelter the weak, serve the suffering, and mend the broken. As we do, we offer the unshakable hope of Christ and his gospel. While we may feel helpless in the face of such a crisis, we can pray like Esther. Ukraine is not God's covenant people, but like Israel, our hope is that the Lord will remove the danger as he did for his ancient people. And as we stay, we pray the church in Ukraine will faithfully trust the Lord and our neighbors as we serve our neighbors. This is a picture of full maturation of treating your neighbors well. That's really what the text is about, treating your neighbors well. How much better can you serve your neighbors than in the midst of the storm with love, physical and spiritual? Amen? Us musicians.